Despair amidst the ruins. Zillah huddled beneath the rubble, her small azure body racked with pain. The young Varnaxian girl didn't know how long she had been trapped, only that it felt like an eternity. Smoke choked the air, while the clamor of warfare, plasma blasts, shattering stone, anguished screams, pounded relentlessly in her pointed ears. With each ragged breath, Zillah's broken ribs sent slivers of agony lancing through her chest. Indigo blood seeped from a jagged gash on her forehead, the sticky warmth oozing into her large almond-shaped eyes. One of her long, delicate limbs was twisted at a sickening angle, crushed beneath a slab of concrete. Hope had faded like the weak rays of sunlight struggling to penetrate the thick clouds of dust. Hours ago, when the bombardment first shattered her family's modest dwelling, Zillah had cried out for help until her voice turned raw. She wailed for her mother and father, but no answer came. Only a terrible, empty silence, one she dared not contemplate. Through the ringing in her ears, Zillah heard the crunch of heavy boots on gravel. A flicker of desperate optimism welled within her. She craned her slender neck, ignoring the way it made her vision swim, and peered at the figure striding past. The hope died as swiftly as it had surged. It was a Varnaxian soldier, his midnight blue skin streaked with soot and crimson blood. Sleek black armor encased his lean frame, a plasma rifle clutched in his four-fingered hands. His face was gaunt, his orange eyes haunted by the specters of war. "Please," Zillah croaked, her musical voice cracking. "Help me." But the soldier didn't even spare her a glance. He marched on, his attention focused solely on the distant sounds of combat. Zillah watched him go, cold despair settling over her like a shroud. The war between the Varnaxians and the brutal Krodax Empire had raged for as long as Zillah could remember. The reptilian Krodax, with their vicious talons and scaled hides, sought to conquer and enslave. They swept across the galaxy like a plague, leaving only ashes and bones in their wake. Varnax, though technologically advanced, was a peaceful world. Its people, with their lithe frames and azure skin, were artists, poets, and philosophers. They had no stomach for bloodshed. But when the Krodax arrived, their warships darkening the skies and disgorging hordes of snarling warriors, the Varnaxians had no choice but to fight. Now, after years of conflict, Zillah's once beautiful city lay in ruins. Graceful spires that had reached for the heavens were now nothing more than jagged stumps. Lush parks and gardens, where Zillah had played and laughed, were blasted wastelands. The streets echoed with the ceaseless drumbeat of artillery, a macabre symphony of destruction. A shadow fell across Zillah's prone form. She looked up, squinting against the sudden brightness, and found herself staring into the merciless eyes of a Krodax soldier. The towering reptile sneered down at her, his lipless mouth peeling back to reveal rows of serrated teeth. Obsidian scales covered his massive frame, arranged in segmented plates like some nightmarish exoskeleton. A wicked-looking plasma rifle was slung across his broad back, a jagged combat knife sheathed at his waist. Zillah went rigid with fear, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. She knew all too well the tales of Krodax brutality. Entire cities massacred, survivors forced into slavery, subjected to unspeakable cruelties. They viewed other races as little more than chattel, resources to be exploited and discarded. The Krodax warrior studied Zillah for a long moment, his slit pupil eyes cold and calculating. Then, with a dismissive snort, he turned and stomped away. In his callous assessment, a half-dead Varnaxian child wasn't worth the effort to dispatch. Tears streamed down Zillah's dust-caked cheeks as she watched the Krodax depart. Despair crushed down on her, as heavy and unyielding as the debris pinning her broken body. She was alone, abandoned, left to slip slowly into oblivion amidst the uncaring ruins. A part of Zillah longed to surrender, to let the comforting embrace of darkness take her away from the pain and grief. What hope was there in a galaxy so consumed by cruelty and destruction? What chance did one small, fragile child have against the pitiless tides of war? But deep within Zyla's heart, beneath the layers of anguish and fear, a stubborn ember refused to be extinguished, a whisper of defiance, an innate refusal to accept the finality of her fate. It urged her to keep breathing, to cling to life, even as the shadows crept ever closer. And so Zyla held on, her small chest rising and falling in shallow, labored breaths. She stared up at the smoke-veiled sky, her vision blurring at the edges. The cacophony of battle seemed to recede, replaced by a distant ringing in her ears. A strange lassitude crept over her, a numbing coldness that seeped into her veins. As consciousness began to fade, Zyla sent a final, desperate prayer into the uncaring heavens, a plea for salvation, for some flicker of light in the all-consuming darkness. She never expected an answer. But the universe, it seemed, still held some small measure of mercy. For at that moment, a new sound reached Zyla's ears, the steady thud of approaching footsteps, the rustle of fabric, the clink of equipment. A face swam into view above her, a stranger's visage unlike any she had seen before. Warm amber eyes, filled with concern and determination, met her fading gaze. Strong, hairless features were set in a mask of focused intensity. "Hold on, little one," the stranger murmured, his voice a soothing rumble. "I've got you. You're going to be all right." As gentle hands began to shift the rubble, working to free her battered form, Zyla felt a flicker of something she had thought lost forever. Hope, a light in the darkness. Sergeant Liam Hawkins moved through the war-ravaged streets with practiced efficiency, his combat boots crunching on the rubble. The human medic's eyes, the rich brown of freshly tilled earth, scanned the shattered buildings and cratered roads with a mixture of sorrow and grim determination. Liam was no stranger to the horrors of war. He had enlisted in the United Earth Force's Medical Corps to save lives, to be a beacon of hope amidst the chaotic violence of the galaxy's many conflicts. From the scorching deserts of Aramis II to the frozen wastes of Keln, he had tended the wounded and comforted the dying, his unwavering compassion a light against the darkness. Now, as an embedded medic with the 15th Peacekeeping Division, Liam found himself on Varnax, a once idyllic world reduced to ashes by the cruel machinations of the Krodax Empire. The reptilian conquerors had swept through the galaxy like a plague, their vicious marauders enslaving or exterminating any civilization that dared resist. The Varnaxians, despite their advanced technology and cultured society, had been woefully unprepared for the savagery of the Krodax onslaught. Their graceful cities, soaring towers of shimmering crystal and verdant gardens, now lay in ruins, shattered by orbital bombardments and relentless ground assaults. Liam's unit had been dispatched to Varnax to provide humanitarian aid and support to the beleaguered Varnaxian resistance. It was a daunting task, with supply lines stretched thin and the constant threat of Krodax attacks looming over them. Yet Liam faced each day with unwavering resolve, driven by an unshakable belief in the value of every life. As he navigated the debris-strewn path, his ears attuned to the distant echoes of battle, a faint sound caught his attention. It was a soft whimpering, barely audible above the ambient crackle of flames and the groaning of settling rubble. Liam froze, his head cocked to the side as he strained to pinpoint the source. There it was again, a pitiful mewling, like a kitten in distress. Liam's heart clenched as he realized it was coming from beneath a collapsed wall just ahead. He broke into a run, his medkit bouncing against his hip as he closed the distance. Skidding to a halt beside the pile of broken masonry, Liam dropped to his knees and began frantically clearing away the debris. His gloved hands worked with desperate speed, heaving aside chunks of concrete and twisted metal. Sweat beaded on his brow, stinging his eyes, but he ignored it, focused solely on the fading cries emanating from within. As he lifted a final slab of shattered plascrete, Liam's breath caught in his throat. There, curled in a pitiful ball amidst the dust and rubble, lay a young Varnaxian girl. Her azure skin was mottled with bruises and caked with grime, her delicate features contorted in pain. One slender limb was twisted at an unnatural angle, pinned beneath a heavy beam. Indigo blood seeped from a gash on her forehead, painting a vivid contrast against her pale complexion. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, labored breaths, each one a fragile whisper of life on the verge of fading. Liam's training took over, his movements precise and efficient as he triaged her injuries. Fractured ribs, probable internal bleeding, severe dehydration. The list of ailments scrolled through his mind like a grim litany. He knew she needed immediate medical attention, far more than he could provide here amidst the rubble. Reaching for his comlink, Liam requested an urgent medevac. "I have a critically injured Varnaxian child," he relayed, his voice tight with urgency, requesting immediate extraction to the field hospital. Static crackled over the line, followed by the clipped tones of his commanding officer. "Negative, Hawkins. We're stretched thin as it is. Leave the Varnaxian. Stick to your mission objective." Liam's jaw clenched, a flash of anger surging through him. How could he abandon this innocent child, leave her to die alone and afraid in the ruins of her home? It went against everything he believed in, everything that made him human. "With all due respect, sir," Liam replied, his voice level but firm, "I swore an oath to protect and heal. I won't leave her behind." Without waiting for a response, he cut the link and turned his attention back to the injured girl. Her eyes, a vivid amber, fluttered open as he gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. Pain and fear swirled in their depths, but beneath it all, Liam saw a flicker of something else. Hope. "It's okay," he murmured softly, offering a reassuring smile. "I've got you. You're safe now." With infinite care, Liam began extricating the girl from the rubble. His hands moved with practiced precision, stabilizing her injuries as he worked to free her trapped limb. She whimpered softly as the beam shifted, fresh tears tracking through the grime on her cheeks. "I know it hurts," Liam soothed, his heart aching for her suffering. "Just hold on a little longer. I'll have you out of here soon." Minutes felt like hours as Liam labored, but finally, he lifted the girl free from her concrete prison. She was so light in his arms, her body thin and frail from deprivation. Cradling her close to his chest, Liam rose to his feet and began picking his way through the debris-strewn streets. The field hospital was kilometers away, through treacherous, war-torn terrain. Krodax patrols roamed the area, their ruthless warriors eager for slaughter. Every step was a risk, a gamble with both their lives. But Liam didn't hesitate. He moved with single-minded determination, his every thought focused on the precious cargo he carried. This child, this innocent victim of a brutal conflict, deserved a chance at life, and he would do everything in his power to ensure she got it. As he walked, Liam murmured reassurances to the semi-conscious girl. He told her of Earth, of its verdant forests and rolling hills, its mighty oceans and soaring mountains. He described the warmth of the sun on one's face, the sweet scent of wildflowers in bloom, the laughter of children at play. With each word, he painted a picture of hope, of a future beyond the pain and suffering that consumed her world. And though the girl understood little of his foreign tongue, the soothing cadence of his voice seemed to calm her, her tremors easing as she nestled instinctively against his chest. Through the smoke-filled streets and crumbling ruins, Sergeant Liam Hawkins carried his precious charge towards safety and salvation. In a galaxy consumed by darkness, he would be her light, her protector. For in that moment, cradling a broken child against the backdrop of a broken world, Liam knew with unshakable certainty that this was what he was meant to do. To heal, to comfort, to hope. To be a beacon of humanity amidst the inhumanity of war. And he would not fail. Sanctuary and sacrifice. The makeshift field hospital was a hive of controlled chaos, a stark island of sanity amidst the madness of war. Hastily erected tents and prefabricated structures formed a labyrinth of triage areas, operating theaters, and recovery wards. The air hummed with the constant beep of monitoring equipment, the murmur of urgent voices, and the occasional piercing cry of pain. Sergeant Liam Hawkins burst through the entrance, his arms cradling the injured Varnaxian girl. Her azure skin was ashen, her breaths coming in shallow, rapid gasps. The journey through the war-torn streets had been harrowing, every shadow a potential threat, every sound a heart-stopping alarm. But Liam's focus never wavered from his precious cargo, his determination to save this innocent life an unwavering beacon. "I need help here," he called out, his voice cutting through the ambient noise. "Critically injured child, probable internal bleeding, and multiple fractures." A swarm of medics descended upon them, their faces a mix of human and alien features. They worked with practiced efficiency, transferring the girl to a hover gurney and attaching monitoring leads to her frail body. A Yindari doctor, her iridescent scales shimmering under the harsh lights, barked orders in a clipped, accented English. "Prep operating room 3. I want 4 units of Varnaxian-compatible blood and a full trauma kit, stat." Liam found himself swept along in the controlled frenzy, his hand never leaving the girl's limp one as they rushed through the maze of corridors. He whispered reassurances to her unconscious form, promises that everything would be all right, that she was safe now. As they burst into the operating theater, Liam finally relinquished his charge to the waiting surgical team. He stepped back, his heart heavy as he watched them work, their movements precise and urgent. The girl looked so small, so fragile on the operating table, dwarfed by the array of life support machinery and gleaming instruments. A hand fell on Liam's shoulder, startling him from his reverie. He turned to find Captain Nora Vasquez, his commanding officer, her eyes hard beneath furrowed brows. "Hawkins, what the hell do you think you're doing?" she demanded, her voice a low hiss. "You disobeyed a direct order. You abandoned your post." Liam straightened, meeting her gaze unflinchingly. "I couldn't leave her, Captain. She's just a child, an innocent victim of this damn war. I took an oath to save lives, not to turn a blind eye to suffering." Captain Vasquez's jaw clenched, a vein throbbing at her temple. "The Varnaxians aren't our responsibility. We're here to support the resistance, not to play nursemaid to every wounded civilian." Anger flashed through Liam, hot and righteous. "With respect, Captain, that's bullshit. What's the point of fighting if we don't protect those caught in a crossfire? What separates us from the Krodaks if we abandon compassion for expediency?" For a long moment, they stared at each other, a silent battle of wills. Then, to Liam's surprise, the hard lines of Captain Vasquez's face softened, her eyes warming with a glimmer of respect. "You've got guts, Hawkins," she said finally, a hint of a smile tugging at her lips. "And a good heart. I can't condone your actions, but I understand them. We'll talk about the consequences later. For now, make sure that girl pulls through." With a crisp nod, she turned on her heel and marched away, leaving Liam alone with his thoughts and the rhythmic beeping of the monitoring equipment. Hours passed in a blur of anxious pacing and hushed updates from the surgical team. Liam refused to leave, his vigil unbroken as he watched over the girl, willing her to live with every fiber of his being. He thought of his own daughter back on Earth, of the visceral terror he would feel if she were in such dire straits, alone and far from home. Finally, as the artificial night cycle descended upon the base, the Yindari doctor emerged from the operating room, her posture weary but triumphant. "She's stable," she announced, her voice rough with exhaustion. "It was touch and go for a while, but she's a fighter. With time and care, she should make a full recovery." Relief crashed over Liam like a physical wave, so intense it left him lightheaded. He sagged against the wall, tears prickling at the corners of his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered fervently, the words feeling inadequate to convey the depth of his gratitude. "When can I see her?" The doctor smiled, her sharp teeth glinting in the dim light. "She's still under sedation, but you can sit with her if you like. I have a feeling your presence will do her good." Liam needed no further encouragement. He followed the doctor to the recovery ward, his heart racing as he approached the small blanket-swathed form on the bed. The girl looked peaceful in repose, her face free of pain for the first time since he'd found her. Clean bandages swathed her head and limbs, a testament to the skill and care of her healers. As Liam sank into the chair beside her bed, he felt a wave of protectiveness wash over him. This child, this innocent victim of a cruel and senseless conflict, had become more than just another patient. She was a symbol of hope, of the enduring resilience of life in the face of unimaginable adversity. Reaching out, he took her small hand in his, marveling at the delicate fingers, the papery thin skin. "You're safe now," he murmured, his voice soft but fervent. "I won't let anyone hurt you ever again. I promise." And there, in the hushed sanctuary of the recovery ward, Sergeant Liam Hawkins made a silent vow. No matter the cost, no matter the consequences, he would protect this child. He would be her guardian, her champion, her unwavering beacon of hope in a galaxy consumed by darkness. For in the end, what was his own comfort, his own safety, compared to the precious gift of a life saved, a future restored? With a gentle squeeze of the girl's hand, Liam settled in for a long vigil, ready to face whatever challenges the morrow might bring. Together, forging an unlikely bond, consciousness returned to Zillah in fits and starts, a gradual surfacing from the murky depths of oblivion. She floated in a haze of confusion and disorientation, her mind struggling to make sense of the unfamiliar sensations assaulting her. The first thing she noticed was the absence of pain. The all-consuming agony that had been her constant companion for so long was gone, replaced by a dull, throbbing ache that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. It was a strange feeling, almost unsettling in its novelty. Next came the sounds, the steady beep of machinery, the soft rustle of fabric, the murmur of distant voices. They were alien noises, so different from the cacophony of war that had been her lullaby for as long as she could remember. With a Herculean effort, Zyla forced her heavy eyelids open, blinking against the harsh glare of artificial light. Her vision swam, blurred shapes and colors coalescing into a confusing tableau. She was lying in a bed, swathed in soft blankets, her broken body encased in a web of tubes and wires. Panic surged through her, a primal wave of fight-or-flight instinct. She thrashed weakly, a whimper of fear escaping her parched lips. Where was she? What had happened to her? The last thing she remembered was the crushing weight of debris, the agonizing realization that she had been abandoned to die alone in the ruins of her home. A gentle hand came to rest on her forehead, large and warm against her clammy skin. Zyla flinched instinctively, her heart racing as she turned to face this new potential threat. But instead of the cruel visage of a Krodax warrior, she found herself staring into a pair of kind, amber eyes set in a hairless, pink-tinged face. It was the stranger who had saved her, the one who had pulled her from the rubble and carried her to safety. "Easy there, little one," the stranger murmured, his voice a soothing rumble. "You're safe now. No one's going to hurt you." Zyla stared at him, fear and confusion warring with a tentative flicker of hope. She had never seen a being like him before, with his smooth skin and small, rounded ears. But there was a gentleness in his gaze, a warmth that seeped into her battered soul like a healing balm. "Tell you, where am I?" she rasped, her voice little more than a whisper. "What happened?" The stranger smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "You're in a human field hospital. I brought you here after I found you in the ruins. You were badly hurt, but our doctors patched you up. You're going to be okay." Human. The word was unfamiliar to Zoila, but she clung to it like a lifeline. If this stranger was a human, and the humans had saved her, then maybe, just maybe, there was still goodness in the galaxy. "I'm Sergeant Liam Hawkins," the human continued, his hand still resting gently on her forehead. "What's your name?" "Zyla," she whispered, the syllables feeling strange on her tongue. It had been so long since anyone had asked her name, since anyone had cared enough to know who she was. "Zyla," Liam repeated, his smile widening. "That's a beautiful name. It's nice to meet you, Zyla." Over the next few days, as Zyla slowly regained her strength, Liam became her constant companion. He sat by her bedside for hours on end, regaling her with stories of his homeworld, a place called Earth, where the skies were blue and the grass was green, and children played in peace beneath a warm golden sun. He told her of his own family, his wife, Laura, and their little daughter, Sophie. He showed her pictures of them, their smiling faces frozen in time on the small handheld device he carried. Zyla marveled at the images, at the pure, unbridled joy she saw in their eyes. It was a foreign concept to her, the idea of a life untouched by war and suffering. In turn, Zyla began to open up to Liam, sharing halting tales of her own life before the Krodax invasion. She spoke of her parents, of their love for her and for each other, of the happy times they had shared in the peaceful gardens of their home. She spoke of her dreams, of her hopes for a future that had been so cruelly snatched away. And as the bond between them grew, as the seeds of trust and affection took root in the fertile soil of shared experience, something began to change within Zyla. The aching void in her heart, the yawning chasm of grief and despair, began to fill with a new emotion: hope. Hope for a future beyond the pain and the loss. Hope for a galaxy where children like her could grow up without the specter of war looming over them. Hope for a life where kindness and compassion could triumph over cruelty and hate. It was a fragile thing, this newfound hope, as delicate and ephemeral as a butterfly's wing. But as Zyla looked into Liam's warm, caring eyes, as she felt the comforting strength of his presence, she knew that she would cherish it, nurture it, and never let it go. For in this unlikely friendship, forged in the crucible of war and suffering, Zyla had found a light in the darkness, a beacon to guide her through the long, uncertain road ahead. And with Liam by her side, she knew that she could face whatever challenges the future might bring. Together. Galactic repercussions. News of Sergeant Liam Hawkins' daring rescue spread like wildfire through the ranks of the United Earth Forces, whispered in awed tones around mess hall tables and in the cramped confines of transport shuttles. The tale of the human medic who had risked everything to save a single Varnaxian child became a rallying cry, a symbol of the enduring power of compassion in the face of overwhelming odds. But not everyone saw Liam's actions as heroic. Some, particularly among the upper echelons of the military hierarchy, viewed his disobedience as a dangerous precedent, a threat to the chain of command and the smooth functioning of the war machine. They argued that by prioritizing the life of one enemy civilian over his duties, Liam had set a perilous example that could undermine the very foundations of military discipline. Debates raged in the halls of power, impassioned voices rising and falling like the tides of war. Some called for Liam to be court-martialed, stripped of his rank, and thrown in the brig as a lesson to others who might be tempted to follow in his footsteps. Others, moved by the sheer moral force of his actions, argued for leniency, even commendation. Through it all, Liam remained steadfast in his convictions, his head held high even as he faced the stern gazes of his superiors. In his mind, there was no choice to be made, no dilemma to be wrestled with. He had simply done what was right, what was human, and if the price of that humanity was his own career, his own freedom, then so be it. But as the story of Zyla's rescue spread beyond the confines of the military, rippling out into the wider galaxy, something unexpected began to happen. The tale of the human who had saved a Varnaxian child struck a chord with the war-weary populations of 100 worlds, igniting a spark of hope in hearts long grown cold with cynicism and despair. On Earth, Liam's actions became a rallying cry for those who had grown tired of the endless cycle of violence and retribution. Protests erupted in the streets, with millions demanding an end to the war and a return to the values of peace and cooperation that had once been the hallmark of human civilization. The faces of Liam and Zyla, the unlikely symbols of a galaxy's yearning for reconciliation, graced the banners and placards of 1,000 marches. And on Varnax, Whispers of the humans' compassion began to circulate among the battered remnants of the resistance. For a people who had known nothing but cruelty and oppression at the hands of the Crodax, the idea that an outsider, a member of another species, could show such selfless kindness was a revelation. It was a flicker of light in the darkness, a reminder that even in the midst of the most terrible adversity, the flame of hope could never be fully extinguished. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the tide began to turn. The story of Liam and Zyla, amplified by the power of a million voices raised in unison, became a catalyst for change on a galactic scale. Diplomatic channels long grown cold with distrust and animosity began to thaw as the leaders of Earth and Varnax, moved by the groundswell of public sentiment, reached out to one another in a tentative gesture of reconciliation. Peace talks began in earnest, with negotiators from both sides working tirelessly to find common ground amidst the rubble of war. It was a long and arduous process, fraught with setbacks and moments of bitter recrimination. But always, the image of a human soldier cradling a Varnaxian child in his arms served as a reminder of what was at stake, of the shared humanity that bound them all together. And through it all, Liam and Zyla remained at the center of the storm, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. For Liam, the decision to remain on Varnax, to see the peace process through to its conclusion, was an easy one. He knew that his place was by Zyla's side, helping her to rebuild her shattered world and to find a new purpose in the aftermath of tragedy. Together, they worked tirelessly to bring hope and healing to the war-torn streets of Varnax. Liam used his medical skills to tend to the wounded and the sick, while Zyla, with her intimate knowledge of her people's culture and needs, served as a bridge between the human peacekeepers and the wary Varnaxian populace. Slowly, painstakingly, a new Varnax began to rise from the ashes of the old. Schools and hospitals were rebuilt, their halls once again filled with the sounds of laughter and learning. Parks and gardens, long abandoned to the ravages of war, bloomed anew under the tender care of human and Varnaxian hands alike. And in the streets, where once only the echoes of gunfire and the cries of the dying had reigned, a new sound began to emerge, the sound of hope, of life, of a future worth fighting for. And at the heart of it all, Liam and Zyla stood tall and proud, living embodiments of the power of compassion to triumph over hate, of the indomitable resilience of the spirit in the face of even the darkest adversity. Their story, once a simple tale of a single act of kindness, had become something far greater, a beacon of hope for a galaxy lost in the shadow of war, a shining example of the best that sentient life could be. For Liam, looking out over the peaceful streets of a rebuilt Varnaxian city, his hand resting gently on Zyla's shoulder, there was no doubt in his mind that he had made the right choice. In saving one small life, he had helped to save an entire world. And in doing so, he had discovered a truth that would guide him for the rest of his days, that in the end, it is not the grand gestures or the sweeping victories that define us, but the small, everyday acts of kindness and compassion that light the way forward. One heart, one soul, one choice at a time.